I'm willing to bet that you've written a really cool SQL query in the past, and then when you come to revisit the code a few weeks later, you get completely lost in your own code. And this could be 10 times worse if you have to have a colleague read your code. So today, I want to show you how to write SQL queries that read like a best-selling story. Let's dive right in. So the problem is that SQL forces you to think all at once, and that's how your code can get super messy. But what if you could break your code into separate steps that kind of read like chapters in a book? This is where CTEs, or common table expressions, come in. This is what allows you to split your code into easily digestible, readable, and editable sections. So how do you actually write CTEs? It's pretty simple. You always start by writing with, then name the table anything you'd like, write as, and then you can put your query in the parentheses there. And then for the next table that you want to create, you can just call it whatever you'd like, write as again, and put everything in the parentheses again. And you can do this as many times as you'd like until you're done. For this example, we're going to be looking at two different tables, one called users, which looks at a bunch of users on Stack Overflow, and another table that looks at questions, so all the questions that were asked on the platform. So when you look at it from this lens, it's a little confusing right off the bat. So I see that we're using the users table. We're also joining on the questions and only looking at this specific date, reputation over 1,000. Also, so just off the bat, it's a little bit difficult to understand what's really going on. It would probably take a minute or two. This is not a crazy example, but it could be improved. So let's see how this code would look if we used CTEs instead. Here, like I was saying, you break it up into digestible sections. So here we can see we have one table that's called high rep users. So we're only looking at users that have over 1,000 reputation. Then we're creating another table called questions, which is only finding the questions from 2022. So that's pretty clear. Then we're joining all of the users and their questions. So we're going to find the person's name and their reputation, and we're going to join all of the questions that that person asked. Then we're going to aggregate everything. So we're going to, for each person and their reputation, we're going to see how many questions they answered, as well as the average score that they got. And then finally, we're going to show all the result of all of that. And we're filtering to make sure we're only keeping users that answered more than 5 questions. So as you can see, even though the code is a bit longer, it's a lot easier to digest. And also when it comes to debugging your code, it's a lot simpler to do so because you can go section by section. And obviously it's a lot easier to read when you come back to it, or if you have to send this code to one of your colleagues or coworkers. If you like this video, feel free to watch one of these two videos, which were chosen specifically for you by YouTube's algorithm. Thanks a lot.